I'm going to tell two stories. But before I go, let me see a show of hands. How many here are in $0 to $5 million in revenue? See a show of hands. Who is pre-revenue? I should have asked that first. All right, that one dude. Good job. That other guy too. All right, who is 5 to 10? Who is 10 to 25? Okay. Who is 25 to 100? Or 25 to 50? Perfect. So this is going to be right in the middle of the fairway for you. So this is a story of my journey of taking a company from zero and an idea that did not exist before all the way to $250 million. But I'm going to stop at 100 because 100 is hard enough. So outreach, when we came to the market, there was no science behind the exercise of building pipeline. Yet pipeline building was probably the most important thing anybody can do to drive revenue. And I came into the market when the lore or the talk about pipeline generation was all about inbound. So HubSpot was massive, and Marketo was massive, and Eloqua was massive, and all they talk about is that if you want more pipeline, you will need more content. And that did two damaging things to the market. One, it convinced sellers that you did not need to generate pipeline. It educated a whole fucking generation that doesn't know how to generate pipeline. And now we have to live with that. And the second problem is that it was a lie. So somebody had to go and actually make pipeline a predictable sort of like if you put N in it, you're going to get Y at the other end. And how do you do that? So we invented this category called sales engagement. And sales engagement is very literally the ability to communicate with a customer, somebody you don't know, in an effort to generate a stage 0 or stage 1 pipeline. So that took us from 0 to $2 million in AR. So I was evangelizing in San Francisco, door to door, telling people that there's a better way to do it, and let me show you how. And what was my trick? I would book an appointment. And then when the time came, people asked me, okay, so where is the video link for this appointment? And I would say, I am downstairs and coming up right now. And nobody can say no to somebody who's in your office doing a demo in person. So that's how I generate the majority of the $0 to $2 million in revenue at the very beginning. Then we went from 2 to 10 million in ARR. That was about 50 people, give or take. And the way we got there is by going, really hog wild on the 10 million in ARR. We had a T-shirt that said TMOD, 10 million or die, and everybody wore it. And every week we'll check in with everyone in the organization to make sure that we are all contributing to that $10 million goal, 10 million or die. And that got us to 10 million. So, in the spirit of triple, double, then the next year we need to hit, we went from 10 to 25. And 25 is when everything broke. In that period, 10 million or die, you get to 10 million and you make it, right? But then 10 to 25 is, now you need systems. Now you have, first-line managers and sometimes even second-line managers in your sales team. You have a big HR department, you have training, you have onboarding, you have all these things that become overhead in your organization and doesn't really generate alpha. You're trying to figure out how to hold the whole thing together, given that you don't have processes and you don't have policies and you don't have enough people to actually do it. So that's when he felt everything was stressing, breaking, and that's where I had the most stress in my life. And then once you get to 25, then you need to hit the next double. But you need to hit the next double thinking that the double after is actually even harder. So at 25 to 50 is when you or anyone, or me in this particular case, have to worry about quality of revenue. Meaning, is the ACV high enough? Are you landing at the right spots? Are you landing and expanding with the right timing? Are you talking to the right people? Are you solving the right problems? And are you in the organization in a way that is very strategic? Because otherwise that revenue churns and you don't want to be in that spot. And 50 to 100 is a whole different story because then you have to build the engine for the next double, which is 200. And so that was my story. So what I'm going to share with you is the learnings from that entire journey, the distillation. When I left outreach, I had a catalog of things that I will never do again and some that I will always do again. And this is a summary of it. The first thing is there is a real cost of hiring beyond just headcount. There's a cultural implications of hiring. So every time you hire, you add to the fabric of your organization And like it or not, your culture will change. So it is hard when you're growing fast or you're trying to grow fast to slow down the hiring and be very meticulous about every single individual that joins the organization. So now that we have AI and we have agents, I urge you to resist hiring. And I'm not saying like don't hire. I'm just saying resist it. Look for other ways to hire. So right now I have a rubric internally that if it cannot be replaced by AI or we don't know how to do it internally, we find a contractor. Why? Because a contractor will do the job and then leave, and you don't have to go through HR cycles to get that person out. And if it's not a contractor, then get an advisor. Or again, try to resist hiring at all times. Reprioritize if you have to, but try not to hire because every hire will shift the fabric of your organization. And when you hire, a lot of VCs or a lot of senior people will tell you, oh, hire the person who's been there, done that, right? The senior leader, the one who has, the grown-up, the person with experience. The problem with experience is that the experience of the last 15 years matter nothing for the experience that you will need in the upcoming 10 years. That's number one. Number two, every experienced hire will bring their own baggage, their own things that made them successful in the past. And a lot of that has to do with politics, unfortunately. So when you're hiring an experienced person, you usually hire a bag of political tricks that come along the skills that they bring. And you're getting both. There's no way to separate one from the other. And the moment you get that bag of political tricks in your organization, those are your political tricks now. So try to avoid it. And last, do not do paint by the numbers hire. Something that drove me crazy when I was at Outreach is that when we hit certain number of engineers, I immediately got like, oh, okay, we need X many product people for engineers, or X many program managers for engineers, or X many designers for engineers. That is all bullshit. Always be first principle about anything you're doing. Right now, anyone can be a designer and any designer can be an engineer. So make sure that you are being principled about the people that you're bringing on so that you don't have to grow the organization beyond what is absolutely needed to generate alpha. And that's, you're going to hear me say that a lot. Your job is to generate alpha for yourself, for your investors. And if what you're doing is not generating alpha, then don't do it. Second thing. So this is probably where I spend the most of my time because I sold to salespeople. So I got to see the breadth of efficiencies. The most important thing, the biggest myth that I found scaling Outreach is that we're all told that at the very beginning you do things that don't scale, and you put people where software, we don't have time to build software, and at the end it all washes up and it's okay. It works in engineering, it works in product, it doesn't work in sales. In sales, how you start is almost how you end, almost all the time. It's really hard to get more efficient in sales as you grow. And the better way to do it is to start thinking about, if you are super successful, what is your efficiency frontier that you need to be hitting, and bring that back to today. So for instance, I don't measure revenue growth right now. Why? Because I can sell $5 million or $10 million or $50 million of anything. But what is hard is to sell high ACV products. That requires a lot more thinking. That requires negotiation. That requires seniority. That requires you to be a master, either MedPick or Challenger or some other way for you to navigate the organization in which you're selling. That requires that you stuff your product with value and your storytelling is impeccable. So for me, what I track internally is like, okay, so last month we closed a couple of deals and they were in the 10K ACV. The month after was in the 20K ACV. And my goal is to get to 100K ACV and make that a regular thing. Why? Because ACV is very, very, it's a very natural line for you to draw a line and say, I'm going to hire more reps that can hit 100K ACV deals. And those reps will be more likely to be efficient than ones that is selling 10, 15, 20K ACV deals. And the number that you need to keep in mind is this. Your rep needs to contribute 4 times their OTE. If you're not hitting, I think David Sachs came up with that number. There is, on the margins, of course, more or less. But if you're not hitting that number, you're not going to build an efficient go-to-market engine. So make sure that whatever you do, whatever you set up your team, whatever your land and expand motion is, that at the end of the day, your quota is 4x the rep OTE. Because that's where you're going to live. And it's really hard to change that over time. And the last point here is external CROs are very useful, but I much prefer that you bring somebody relatively junior in the organization and you grow them yourself. That person will understand your sales cycle, your customer, your product in a way that no external CRO will. And I see a lot of CROs fail. If you go look at the average tenure of a CRO, is less than 2 years. Why? Because the first year is to find the bathroom, and the second year is to miss a number. So promote somebody from within and make sure that you train them up to be the right person for the right job, for the right seller, for the right sales cycle, for the right product. This one is around engineering, and I don't know how many engineers are in the room or people in charge of product. 1, 2, a few. Cool. So when I built Outreach, there was this sort of like, seek, of perfection, of trying to figure out exactly what the customer requirement was, and spending a lot of time talking to customers to get the right requirement and just build the right product and build it once. Why? Because engineering cycles were so precious. And you don't want to waste them on something that the customer doesn't want. So you want to put them on the right thing at all times. I have to unlearn that. It's much better to build something bad and then bring it to the customer again, feedback from that, and build it again and again and again and again until you hit the right product fit for your customer. We call that internally at Pay, we call that the green line. Actually, I didn't come up with it. My co-founder Raj came up with it. Why? Because your learning is through the product iterations. It's only through product iterations and reps in the product itself that you're going to learn whether the product is missing or not missing. And if you follow the red line, which is trying to build the perfect product, you may hit it, but the problem is then you may have built too much. And when a product has too much complexity, then you have adoption problems. And then you're trying to unwind the adoption problems because you build the wrong product. Whereas if you start simple and overcomplicate it over time, it's less likely that you hit that problem. So the more important thing is that you hit the customer in the problem that matters the most, and that you don't, value your own time as the most important thing. Is your customer's feedback is the most important thing, and doing the right thing for the customer is the most important thing, not your engineering's time. I didn't come up with this either, but I experienced it, and it was the co-founder of Rippling who actually came up with this truth, which is that process debt actually never goes away. It's more insidious than technical debt. Technical debt, you can actually fix it over time. Process debt is really hard to fix because it's completely hidden. So for me, for instance, process debt happened in the way in which we were behind some engineering, some product roadmap items, and my product team, who was dealing with the brunt of these asks, developed a whole playbook on how to get a customer to go around the problem and use the application in a completely different way that we never saw it until I actually, decided to take a customer ticket to figure out what was going on and why we're returning some customers. And then I realized that in the fourth floor, the entire floor had developed a new way of dealing with the problem as opposed to just escalating to engineering. Those things are process debt. These are bandits that you put in your process to make sure that you don't, bother the people who are too important or too expensive to actually fix the problem. That debt is really hard to pay back. So don't incur it. Stay lean. Make sure that your team, there's a good amount of engineering and leadership attention paid to the process issues of your organization, and fix them as they come. Don't let them linger. Don't work around them. Just fix it. It's really hard to pay process debt, and you will see that as you scale. And finally, but most importantly, is culture. So culture, this is the reason why I said everything I said. So culture is everything that you do. And culture is the worst tolerated behavior in your organization that doesn't get punished or doesn't get flagged. So this is why hire really slowly, because culture is the most important thing you have. And make sure that in your culture, you bake in customer obsession. A lot of companies I see start, and the culture is about them and everybody feeling good and everybody, being happy at work and all that other stuff. It doesn't matter. It doesn't generate alpha. The only thing that generates alpha is customer obsession. So make sure that you bake that into the culture, and culture is part of your DNA. Nobody will tell me that they have a bad culture. Everyone has a great culture. Of course you do. But if you really haven't fired somebody for a values violation, you don't have a culture, you don't have strong values, and they will creep. So make sure that there is a way, a mechanism. It doesn't have to be firing. That's a very U.S. thing in Europe. I don't know what you guys do, but I'm sure that you find out other ways to maintain your culture and be very diligent and strict about what's in and what's out within your core values. And let me leave this chapter with this. As a leader, you're not building a company. You're building a system that builds a company. So you're growing other people. You're creating the systems. You're creating the processes. And as you scale, you will see that walk on its own, kind of like a baby. They'll walk and then eventually run. And it's a one-way street. What you build is hard to unbuild, because that's what's baked into the culture of your organization. So let's talk about paid and the growth of the AI economy. So for those who haven't heard the story, paid became an idea to me when I couldn't monetize and track the costs and manage the AI agents that I was building at Outreach. So that my entire stack in the back office was not built for agents. It was built for a seat-based economy. And agents have two properties that are really interesting. One is that they become more autonomous over time. And two, as they become more autonomous, the cost of that autonomy actually goes up. So they're performing more complex tasks over time for which I can't capture value, but I also can't see my cost. So if you don't have the right instrumentation for where you're building, then, a lot of things go haywire. And that was the impetus for me to sort of like throw myself into this problem. And it wasn't until I had this realization that I realized the size of the problem. And I think for all of you who are building software companies that are on the cloud, and as you're thinking about your next, gear of growth, and as you're thinking about, what am I selling to my customers in the future, you need to think about that whatever you're building needs to be accretive to both software and labor, meaning you have to replace something that is there in a way that is more efficient, or you have to generate alpha for your customer in a different way with more efficiencies. But in either way, you're preventing a hire or you're replacing software. That's the only way to grow. You're not going to fix or band-aid a process that exists right now. That's the incumbent's job. Your job is to disrupt the current situation. And it has to be done by trying to figure out how do you disrupt both labor and software. And we are seeing that in the growth of the market. So, every quarter when somebody takes a polls of how big the AI agent economy is, it adds another 100 in the billions to the left of that number. So it's something that is continuing to grow, and as we know, all the hyperscalers are stoking it, and all the foundation models are stoking it. So there's a lot of momentum behind it and a lot of money behind it. So there's only one way this goes, and you can see that in the penetration of agents in the enterprise. And you can see as the total spend in AI just continues to go up, and there's no relenting on this. This is like gravity pulling in a different direction. So agents are different in that they have three core properties that are different. One is that it's really hard to price them. In the past, we were okay pricing per seat. Why? Because a human being had to take an action for value to be unlocked. But that's not the case anymore. When we put an agent against a ticket or a customer complaint or against a negotiation or against a document or against a legal document, the agent is actually capable, if coded correctly, to actually perform the full task. So not only you are replacing the software that was doing the work before, you're replacing also the person who was doing the work before and all the software that came with it, all the HR software and the payroll software and the performance review software and the CRM software that was tracking the human is no longer needed. So your possibilities when you're building agents are much larger per unit of work. So how do you price that? That was always a question. And it turns out that my friend Madhavan, who wrote Pricing Innovation, and now he just wrote Pricing Scaling Innovation, came up with this really useful framework on how to think about agents. So agents have two properties. The kind of work that they do have two properties. One is autonomy, and the other one is attribution. So autonomy is how alone can you leave the agent to go do the entire work, and attribution is how come you say the agent actually did it versus saying, well, it was a little bit of the agent and a little bit of somebody else. And the land of milk and honey, the land where you want to live, where you capture the most amount of value, is in high autonomy, high attribution. And there's a handful of examples there. So one is, the triumvirate of Sierra, Decagon, and Intercom that are all resolving tickets and charging per resolution. Why? Because they resolve the ticket, and if the human gets involved, you don't pay. Easiest pie. But there's other companies that are doing the same thing. So companies in mortgages, companies in renewing insurance policies, they're taking a percentage of their insurance policies. They're taking a percentage of the mortgage. So those are high attributable events that get paid a lot for it. So that's a really good spot to live. As you move to the left on the attribution, and you can attribute fewer things, then you're in the land of, paying per task or paying per, open headcount that you're not hiring, all the way down to paying on a token basis because you're going to use the tool in many different ways, like you use OpenAI or Anthropic or AWS. So those are the problem of being on the left of the attribution curve is that you get commoditized, meaning you have constant pricing pressure on lowering your costs because there is somebody else who has exactly the same token that can perform the same work. And if you're not diligent in lowering your own price, you're going to get squeezed. So to the right of attribution, you get to have a bespoke pricing. You have to have, you get to capture the value that you deliver. To the left of attribution, you get pricing pressure. That's the way that works. Now, going from top to bottom, you have high autonomy, which is where you expect agents to behave. But some agents are delivering value without a lot of autonomy. So you can see that in Cursor or in Clay, where you actually prompt the agent to do work or like writes alongside of you. That's a fine place to live, as long as you figure out how do you get the agent to actually do the things for you, as opposed to you having to prompt it. And then to the left of that, in the lower left quadrant, you have, the seat models, and they're all, if you look at the stock of these companies right now, they all have gone down over 30% over the last 12 months. Why? Because we live in a world that we're not hiring anymore. We're not hiring as fast. And we have a much higher bar for hiring. The number of people that I know in marketing are looking for a job has increased 10x, and that's using my personal network. So if you're charging per seat, if you're Workday and your job is to put a seat and then put a human on a seat, you are in a very existential crisis right now. So if you are a seat-based price, start thinking about how do you get out of that spot. Because seats are only going down or staying flat compared to agent workflows that are going up. The second problem with agents is that the value they create is invisible. Meaning, you don't get to tell everyone what the agent did because the agent did it in the obscurity of the LLM. It's a little bit like that employee that does all this fantastic work but nobody knows about it. It's the same thing. If you don't show the value to the customer or the agent you build, the value will not be attributed to them even though they did the work. And most of the time, the value you get to see is very small compared to the value they generate. So you have to figure out how to show the value that you generate. I mean, this is partially why the whole study that happened on MIT, the 95% of pilots were failing. Well, a lot of people poke holes in it. The end was small, blah, 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 blah. But if you go look at the pilots that you're seeing in reality right now, even if they're not failing, they're stalling. And all of us who are in sales know that a stalled pilot is a lost pilot, and you have to restart it again. So if somebody were to run the same study against a much larger end, you'll find a lot of pilot stalls. Why? Because the ROI is unclear. There's no clear decision point in which you say, look, this pilot was a complete success, let's move forward, because there is no ROI in it. This is why it's super important to make sure that you instrument your agents to show the work that you did and the ROI they're delivering. And by the way, this is going to be very custom. So we're going to have to get out of the world in which we're going to create dashboards that all our customers can see the same. Because each of our customers will find value in your applications in a different way, and that's okay. That's actually a moat. And we don't talk about that moat enough. About the fact that if you can scale your software in such a way that the value that they present to the customer is bespoke to that customer and to that customer's case, they won't be able to compare you to one another. So you get out of the rat race of pricing pressure and you start driving higher ACV deals. So it's super important that you show the value and that your customer believes that the value is unique to them. And last is its margins. And before you get into the whole but inference token cost is going down. Yeah, but inference tokens consumption is going up. The tokens are getting smarter. And guess what? Now we have thinking tokens. Now we are designing agents that loop on their own to figure out if they did the job correctly. Now we have agents checking on agents to make that the answer is correct. So that you prevent things like hallucinations or psychopathy. And as you build more agents and the agents have longer runs and they become more autonomous, your consumption of tokens is going to go up and your margin pressure is going to continue. I literally just got out of an office of one of my favorite companies here in Dublin, and the entire conversation was about cost management. So they have this impetus to go grab market share, right? Grow real fast. But finance is freaking out because they can see the contribution margin is going straight down as the agent gets better over time. And this VC funding will stop at some point. So we all have to get our head and your arms around it to make sure that we build vibrant business that generate alpha for yourself and for your investors. This is one of the charts I spoke before, and to bring it back around. This is why we internally track ACV, because ACV is a true measure of the value that you're creating for the customer, of the confidence of your team to deliver that value, of the ability to hit the nail on the head that when the customer has a problem, you are dealing with the top 1 or 2 problems for your customer. It's when they're willing to pay a lot for your solution. It's then you know that you're on the right track. It's not just about buying. It's not just about product market fit. It's about selling at the very top of the spectrum of your pricing. It's making sure that your margins are always healthy. And you can grow fast on this. You can grow fast on this. As long as you don't get price compare, you're going to grow fast. So make sure that you put as much value that matters to your customers as you can, and track ACV like a hawk. Otherwise, you can't scale. I promise you that. I mean, that's my own journey, but that's it. That's all I have for you. Thank you very much.